On today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we'll be discussing a trade that happened for the Panthers prior to the roster freeze for the Christmas break. We're going to be discussing the NHL, discussing a new 84 game schedule, and we're also going to be discussing Florida Panthers prospects in the upcoming World Junior Tournament and continue to preview tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the New Jersey Devils, all on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, December 21st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also follow the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Ronan, and Locked On NHL Prospects. And don't forget to also subscribe to the Locked On Florida Panthers YouTube page and send in your screenshot of your subscription and your 5-star rating on whichever podcasting platform you listen to Locked On Panthers for your chance to win 2 free tickets for the Florida Panthers versus Vancouver Canucks game on January 14th. You could submit that via DM at LO_FLA Panthers on Twitter or by email at lockedonflapanthers@gmail.com. So a trade happened between the Florida Panthers and the Detroit Red Wings, actually on the day of their most recent matchup between the Florida Panthers and the Boston Bruins, where the Panthers sent Michael Del Zotto to the Detroit Red Wings, who was later shipped to the Anaheim Ducks in a full AHL transaction deal. And with that, the Florida Panthers brought back Givani Smith, a player that the Florida Panthers really saw quite a bit in Detroit, especially last season, where he mostly played for the Detroit Red Wings. Second round pick in 2016, mostly played for the OHL's Guelph Storm before finishing his career off with the Kitchener Rangers, and made his debut in 2020. So it took him 4 years to get to the NHL to play his first game. So 7 points in 46 games in the 2021-22 season for the Detroit Red Wings. And if you hear the name Givani Smith, and that name sounds familiar, his brother Jamel Smith plays under the Tampa Bay Lightning organization for the Syracuse Crunch. He's been up and down between Tampa Bay and Syracuse as well. And the Florida Panthers also signed the son of Todd Bertuzzi, even though Todd Bertuzzi Panthers career was very short-lived. They signed his son Tag Bertuzzi, who recently played for the ECHL's Norfolk Admirals under the Carolina Hurricanes affiliate, even though he wasn't signed to a NHL contract, for 19 points in 25 games. So Bill Zito thought that this was an opportunity to give Tag Bertuzzi a chance. And Tag Bertuzzi was at the Panthers prospect camp earlier this year. So they got a little bit of a good impression there, even though he went elsewhere after the prospect tournament. So a little bit of a chance taken for minor league guys and prospects. And this is where you kind of need to try to hit your home runs when you don't have a lot of draft capital at your disposal, which Bill Zito has been able to hit on a few of these, but this is where you really got to make your money now, where your next first round pick is isn't until 2026. But another thing that the NHL is actually considering doing is an 84 game season. Why is that? It's really not, number one is money. That's number one. But also number two is just the balance in the schedule when it comes to facing certain division opponents versus not. And it all kind of messed up a little bit when Vegas and Seattle came to the NHL. And there's also discussions just this week about how Vegas and Seattle are the two of the most profitable, not profitable, two in the top 5 of teams who generate the most revenue in the NHL. And I believe that has a lot to do with new energy when it comes to a new franchise as well, and getting new hockey fans in a new market and people buying your brand as well. If Seattle doesn't make the playoffs consistently in the next few years, or if Vegas doesn't get back to the Stanley Cup final, I want to see how those revenues look like. But for now, those are the top 5, two of the top 5 teams as far as revenue in the NHL. But it think about just from a Florida Panthers perspective. I mean, you face 16 Western Conference teams twice, and then you subtract that by 32. You have 50 games remaining against Eastern Conference teams, and you're not able to, because you have to play Metro teams at least 3 times. Then it doesn't match as far as getting 4 games versus the rest of the division opponents for your specific division. I mean, just this season alone. I mean, I was talking about this with Nick Fairbanks a few days ago about Detroit's only visit to South Florida was just 2 weeks ago. They're not going to be coming back the rest of the season. So 3 matchups against the Detroit Red Wings. With an 84 game season, you get to have 2 in Detroit and 2 in South Florida. I believe last year, if I'm not mistaken, that the Panthers and the Maple Leafs only played 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. Once in Toronto, twice in South Florida. And this year, Ottawa is the same thing for the Panthers as well, where the Panthers will be hosting Ottawa twice, but will be going to the Canadian Tire Center once this season. So it kind of balances everything as far as more 4-point swings and more division matchups as far as meaningful games as well. So that 84 game season with those 2 expansion teams coming around, already here, it creates more of a bigger picture of one team facing everybody an equal amount of times, and then you have your 2 against each Western Conference team, 3 against a Metro team, and 4 against your 7 division rivals. So that equals out to 84 at the end. And they might cut the preseason by 2 games. I mean, does it really make that much of a difference cutting 2 preseason games? I mean, the players don't even play in every single preseason game, especially towards the end, where you'll see a lot of rest as well before final cuts. And it's more, I feel for the players a little bit. I mean, it's going to generate more revenue. It's going to help with the salary cap. Of course, jersey sponsors, ad boards, regardless of what we think of the ad boards. I got used to them, so they don't bother me anymore. At first they did, but it just is now. But anything to help get the cap up so that a lot of these front offices aren't in big roster crunches. I mean, we're seeing this now with the Panthers, and Gary Bettman saying that we don't know if it's going to be more than 83.5 million next year. I have a hard time believing that with the NHL making a record amount of revenue last year, and with the digital ads, the jersey sponsors, more helmet sponsors as well. And this was all thanks to COVID, which they're trying to make up their profits. And players paying escrow and all that stuff, and then adding 2 more games, which we won't know for a while, but it's a discussion that the NHL is considering. They're considering this 84 game season. I think it will bring more balance, but I do feel for the players who are going to be logging more miles on them and risking more injury as well. You never see leagues reduce games. They're always wanting to generate more money. So it's like, what do we do? Add more. I mean, the NFL, there was a point where there was 14 game regular seasons and then 3 playoff games. Now we see 17, and the NHL has gone basically almost 30 years of doing 82 game seasons. The very first 82 game season was in 95-96, and now, of course, with expansion, that was something that was always going to put things a little out of whack as far as the schedule. Oh my God, especially when it was just Vegas that was added and it was 31 teams, an odd number. Man, that put so many things out of whack. I mean, when it came to specific games. I mean, when the Canadian division was a thing in 2021 and the amount of games you would have, while the Florida Panthers division was 8 games against your division rivals, well, it's quote unquote division rivals at the time, the Canadian division had 7 teams. So there was, as far as trying to fit 56 games, some you would play 10 times and the others you wouldn't play as many. So it just puts things out of whack when it comes to odd or even numbers. And that's really what has been an issue since Vegas and Seattle came around. But it's not a surprise that they're trying to add 2 more games as far as equaling things out about how many times you face your specific division. Because again, this specific season, Detroit 3 times, Ottawa 3 times. The rest of the division, it's 4 times each. So that's a little bit of perspective when it comes to that. But in the next segment, we're going to be discussing the projected Florida Panthers players who are looking to play in the World Juniors this upcoming week in Halifax. We're going to discuss this and more in the next segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball. We've got it all at BetOnline. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. Second segment here on this Wednesday, December 21st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And of course, this is the time of year where roster freeze happens. You can't place players on waivers. You can't make trades right now for each NHL franchise. But also, this is the time of year where we have a little bit of a break from NHL hockey and we get to enjoy the World Juniors. And with a lot of trading of picks and players already participating in multiple World Juniors, like Maki Samoskevich has participated in quite a few now. Kasper Puccio was just in the most recent one. Those players will not be participating in this go round. So just writing down every single roster for the World Juniors to see how many Panthers players are playing. USA, no Panthers. Canada, no Panthers. Evan Nelson was actually one of the first round of cuts for Team Hockey Canada. Austria, none. Germany, none. Slovakia, none. Switzerland, Finland, and Latvia, none. Only 3 players under the Panthers organization that, with their draft rights, are projected to be playing in the upcoming World Juniors next week, and it's Jakub Kaz and Marek Alsher of Czechia. Jakub Kaz was average over a point per game in Ilves, and then is on a loan to Coupe, where he has 9 points in 15 games, a former 6th rounder in the 2021 draft. Merrick Allshire, defenseman, was the first pick of the Panthers' most recent draft in the third round, number 93 overall of the WHL's Portland Winterhawks. 6 goals and 5 assists in 26 games for the defenseman there. And for Team Sweden, Ludvig Jansson, who played in the most recent World Juniors for Team Sweden, didn't play every single game. He was mostly used as that extra defenseman for Team Sweden, but playing over there overseas, and even in a few international games, got 2 assists in 3 games. So those are the following players that are playing for the Panthers in the World Juniors. I mean, just looking at every single roster, and you mostly see Devils, you mostly see the Chicago Blackhawks, you mostly see the Anaheim Ducks. Those are the 3 that caught my eye the most as far as players from different teams who are going to be participating in the World Juniors. I mean, Chicago has 4 on Team Canada alone, while the Panthers have 3 in the entire tournament. So, that again, when you're trading a whole bunch of draft capital and players have already played their fair share amount of World Juniors, this one, just writing it down, I'm like, But it also helps me whenever I do watch these games to just pinpoint more on just less players to keep track of, and to just look more of like what they're doing well versus what they're not. So it's gonna be fun. It's unfortunately it's on NHL Network, so it's not available on every household. But I do have a recommendation on what you could do. Fubo TV, 7-day free trial, has NHL Network. You can watch it there, and then once the 7-day free trial is over, you can just stop the trial so that you don't get charged if you want to watch some World Juniors games. So a little bit of a recommendation, a legal way of doing so if you do want to watch your Cats prospects in the World Juniors. But there's also not a lot of at least the people I've talked to, there's not a lot of energy as far as wanting to watch the World Juniors as well. I mean, especially the most recent one, which was in August, which is not during the NHL season as well. Usually we're used to World Juniors around the end of December on Boxing Day for Canadians as well. And just everything that's just been going on with Hockey Canada as well. And content warning, this is a conversation on sexual assault. We haven't discussed this on the podcast in quite a bit, but the investigation is complete for everything that happened with the 2018 World Junior team and the group sexual assault allegations. And Alex Formanton of the Ottawa Senators had a deadline to sign his RFA deal with the Ottawa Senators, and the Sens were trying to trade him because they didn't see him as part of their future. And also with that looming, it seems that Alex Formanton could or could not be involved, but signs are all indicating that he most likely was involved. So, but the investigation is complete, but no names have been released yet. And just and there was actually a group photo that was found from that night. Just a group photo of Brett Howden of the Vegas Golden Knights, Boris Kachuk as well, Taylor Radish of the Chicago Blackhawks. We mentioned Alex Formanton and Michael McLeod of the New Jersey Devils, who the Panthers are going to be seeing tonight. There's just a group photo of 5 of them from that night. Just a random selfie after winning gold in London, Ontario. And it's not official that those guys are the ones that did it. But if it's from that same night and they happen to be together, you can kind of put 2 and 2 together. And we're familiar with Boris Kachuk and Taylor Radish as far as former division rivals from when they played with the Tampa Bay Lightning. They were part of the Brandon Hagel trade that they sent over to Chicago. But just something that's still looming over Hockey Canada, and what's going to be, I wonder what the timing is going to be of the names that are going to be released. I mean, we mentioned Alex Formanton earlier in the segment. He actually, when he ended up not signing his contract, because he didn't sign a contract due to being an RFA, he isn't eligible at all to play this season in the NHL. So went over to Switzerland to play in their national league, and he's over there. So not a good look for those 5, but it's still not official that those guys are the names. And just as an organization as a whole, I said this in the summer, any profit that Hockey Canada makes, they should be fined that amount. Sure, you can be prideful in your country winning and all that, but as far as the governing body of Hockey Canada, that is just doesn't give me a good feeling in my stomach knowing that they're still going to profit this much money. As far as the current players, I don't think they should be punished as far as whether they participate in the tournament or not. But then there's what Hockey Canada, the organization, gets back. And we spoke about the money that they put away for sexual assault cases in case they need to cover their ass as well. It's just crappy. It's awful that the organization puts money away for these cases instead of educating as well. And it's just sick. It just, and again, this doesn't, it's not to say that all these other organizations under the IIHF don't have blood on their hands neither. We just don't know about it. And by the way, I haven't mentioned that Russia will not be participating in the World Juniors due to everything that's going on in the Ukraine as well. So that's another thing that's going on. But just everything from that investigation, we know it's completed. And I highly recommend that you guys follow Rick Westhead of TSN. He's just been amazing at his coverage when it comes to this. And even with the whole Kyle Beach situation with the Chicago Blackhawks, I mean, the NHL, as far as asking questions to Gary Bettman and Bill Daly, they weren't even going to him over Zoom to ask him questions. And then Pierre LeBrun had to be like, hey, why aren't you allowing Rick Westhead to ask a question? It's because they also got blood on their hands too. And what the NHL is going to do, I hope they do the right thing. I really do. Because nobody should have to go through what that girl went through on the night in London, Ontario, when Hockey Canada played in the World Juniors. And there's only so much that one photo can say, but the fact that it was on that same night from what was reported is it's very telling. It's very telling, and hopefully the right thing happens. In the third and final segment, we are going to continue discussing tonight's matchup between the Florida Panthers and the New Jersey Devils. We're going to be discussing some injury updates, who will be playing, who will not be playing, and also discuss the New Jersey Devils' most recent game prior to this. We're going to discuss that more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Wednesday, December 21st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And the Florida Panthers will, once again, we spoke about earlier in the week, they play a nationally televised game tonight against the New Jersey Devils. And sorry for getting this a little later than you guys are used to, because I actually wanted to get a more accurate picture on who will be playing, who will not be playing, and all. And morning skate ended about 30 minutes ago from this recording. And by the way, tonight's game, we actually got our broadcasters announced for tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the New Jersey Devils. And the Turner Sports is actually, like I predicted, sending their B team to FLA Live Arena for tonight's matchup between the Florida Panthers and the New Jersey Devils. On the call will be Brendan Burke, Darren Pang, and Jennifer Butterill. So those guys will be on the call for tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the New Jersey Devils. So Alexander Barkov was on the ice prior to the Florida Panthers taking morning skate, and if you're there early taking skating around, chances are you're not playing. So Alexander Barkov will not be playing tonight for the Florida Panthers when they face off against the Devils. Anthony Duclair was also on the ice in a yellow non-contact jersey, so he's going to continue to just get back into the groove and just get his legs moving. No pun intended with the leg injury, but Anton Lundell, he's back and he was wearing a regular jersey. It looks that he was going to be playing on that second line. Jameson Olive just tweeted the lines this morning. So it looks like it's going to be Verhaeghe, Bennett, Kachuk on line number 1, Etu, Anton Lundell, and Sam Reinhart on the second line, Ryan Lomberg, Eric Stahl, Nick Cousins, Grigory Denisenko, Zach Dalpe, and Colin White. So it looks like Aleksi Heponiemi has been sent back down to Charlotte. Great to see that Grigory Denisenko is at least going to get at least one more game for the Panthers right before the holiday break. Maybe 2 more, depending on Barkov's status. But honestly, I'm not expecting Alexander Barkov to play the rest of this week. Take some time off to recover and get some rest, and especially after that jab from Nico Hischier last Saturday. I think it's better news than we expected when he came back on the ice today, and we knew that the status was day to day for Barkov, and honestly, to take a full week off of no games, it couldn't have come at a better time. And this is a good time for the Panthers to go on a little bit of a winning streak. I mean, the New Jersey Devils are on a 6-game losing streak. They lost last night to the Carolina Hurricanes, where they had way more shots on goal than Carolina. And Vitek Vanacek was pulled in between the second and third period. Played the first 40 minutes and then was pulled. I mean, just watching the condensed game from last night. I mean, Vitek Vanacek gave up 3 goals on 13 shots. I mean, the amount of pressure they were putting on Pyotr Kochetkov as well. I mean, Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier, they combined for a lot of shots. Let me look up exactly how many shots that they. Nico Hischier had 7 and Jack Hughes had 7. So they combined for 14. They were right in front of the blue paint. Kochetkov was just using his stick to poke check the puck away, using his leg to make incredible saves as well, and just really positionally sound. And there might be a little bit of a goalie controversy right now in Carolina between him, Antti Raanta, and Frederik Andersen. After Antti Raanta started the majority of the games in the playoffs last year due to Freddie Andersen's injury. Freddie Andersen coming from Toronto to Carolina, needing a new scenery, and here comes Pyotr Kochetkov for the Carolina Hurricanes. And even though it hasn't been the best season for Anton Lundell, the Panthers getting him back in the lineup is very crucial for his development as well. And it's for the Cats. I mean, the amount of shots that they put on Kochetkov and the performance that Bobrovsky had against this team, which Bobrovsky will be between the pipes for the Panthers tonight. Just the confidence boost that the Panthers had after that game, Paul Maurice felt that it was appropriate to put Bobrovsky back. Even though, like I said this on Monday, and I'll say this again, I would have loved to see Spencer Knight back after that horrific performance in Boston. I would have loved to see him back to see if he's has the capability of bouncing back after that performance. And I understand, going back to that, why Paul Maurice didn't pull Spencer Knight, because Bobrovsky's starting 6 games straight. So it didn't make sense to put Bobrovsky back in and to pull Spencer Knight. But I would have loved to see him. But we're going to see Bobrovsky tonight for the Panthers. And I don't know who's gonna be starting for New Jersey. I really don't know because after Vanacek being pulled in the third period for Mackenzie Blackwood, and Mackenzie Blackwood, that was his first game action back from his conditioning loan down in Utica, and he didn't even play well in Utica as well. Get a GAA of over 3 in that one, and he's been someone who's the New Jersey Devils, as far as like the media down there has just been talking about, as far as being a problem for the Devils, and the issue has been goaltending. 891 save percentage, along with that 3.03 GAA. So just not a after just a incredible first few weeks for the New Jersey Devils. I mean, they just fallen off completely, and looks like that they lost it. Yes, they did in fact lose the division lead after their game against Carolina. And will the Panthers make it 7 straight for the Devils? They're catching them. They're catching them at a good time. I went into Saturday's game a little nervous against the Devils, because that would be something that, when I spoke about it at the time, of okay, are they going to be more motivated to try to put a good amount of pressure up in front, up on in the low slot, and put pressure on the goaltenders, and continue to forecheck their way onto creating some goals as well. But just on the other end, the Carolina Hurricanes, just in their first shift, 20 minutes in, got a goal via the forecheck as well, after watching the condensed game. So it's just flat out not looking good for the New Jersey Devils. I'm actually going to do something real quick before we sign off, because looking at the first loss for the New Jersey Devils was in their 6-game losing streak, was on December 9th. So looking at it from then until now, December 9th was their first loss. Where do the Devils rank as far as goals? They're 26th in the NHL in goals. So they're not scoring at the high rate that they were earlier in the season. I mean, goals for, as far as the season average, 3.38. But during that 6-game losing streak, it's gone all the way down to 2. So the goals aren't going in. And like we spoke about from J Fresh Hockey, after Saturday, they were number 1 in expected goals. Like I said a few weeks ago after the Tampa Bay loss, miss me with those expected goals, because right now, actual goals in that span from December 9th up to now, 26th in the NHL with 2. And as far as goals against, let me see where they rank as far as the NHL. 4th most, right behind Anaheim and Chicago. And Chicago's been on a losing skid as of late as well. So the Panthers are also giving up a lot of goals in that span too. 3.37 since December 9th. Just looking at that now. So just the scoring has gone cold for the Devils as well. So exactly 4.00 to be exact goals against for the Devils, 2.00 exactly as far as per game. So the scoring has gone cold, and goaltending, they've gone back to where their goaltending was from the season prior, and that was the continuing conversation for the opposition. And even then, still their season average for goals against the New Jersey Devils is still ranked 3rd least in the NHL. But during that span, they're 3rd most as far as giving up goals per game. So gives you a little bit of an indication of why the Devils haven't been only able to get 1 point out of their last 6. So this is the time for the Florida Panthers to pounce, and they got a little bit of a taste of them on Saturday. Time to take advantage again, and this time on the national stage. On tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we're going to be recapping this game between the Florida Panthers and the New Jersey Devils. We're going to be discussing all the players who are coming back to the lineup, and hopefully we avoid the injury bug as well for the Panthers, because after Wednesday's game, you only have one more game prior to the holiday break. So this is the time for the Panthers to go on a little bit of a streak prior to the holiday break, because only two more games before the new year, after that between the Panthers and the Habs, and then a road game at the Carolina Hurricanes. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure you listen to today's episode of Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with your local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today is available on YouTube and on the Odyssey app, or wherever you get your podcasts. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.